As they self-generate their language, what guides them?
Linda, that is a very astute question. So you're right. They've had to leave their Gestalt template behind. And the Gestalt template doesn't necessarily give them clues as to what happens next when they're self-generating. It doesn't necessarily if they've gotten their Gestalts from media. Because, Walt Disney, bless his heart, didn't necessarily look at what would be developmental grammar as, the genie jumped out of the lantern. All of us are probably hearing those words in our heads and we're thinking, oh yeah, if that's going to be my template for self-generating language, I'm going to be in trouble. So very good question. What is the guide? What is the template for grammar? So, as we just talked about, our particular linguistic culture has one, and that's the dreaded grammar. But as our Gestalt processing kids enter this world where they now are being asked to put things in a format that the rest of us use, they have to rid themselves of Robin Williams and that big speech about how hard it is to live in a lantern for a long time. That doesn't give them a template. So basically they have to kind of clear their heads. And that's what stage 3 is all about. And that's what, as we've talked about before, Ann Peters knew, Barry Prezant knew. We all know that we've got to get back to building blocks. Not back to, but we have to get to building blocks because that's going to be the rudiments of self-generated language, which is going to include, not in stage 3, but in stage 4 and beyond, is going to be including grammar. But not just any old grammar. There's a tendency among people to shortcut the process and forget that development of grammar is a process, a developmental process, and it's been studied. I mean, hold up the book there. You've got the book. It's been studied. And back in the 60s, 70s, and even 80s, my particular profession studied it in incredible detail. And that book was published in, what did we?
1974.
1974. And it remains the best source we have for grammatical development. Nice thing is, when Laura Lee wrote that book, she didn't ask for it to be copywritten forever. And she said that after 1983, it was public domain or whatever that's called. And so that became my little grammar compendium that I carried with me always as I was a clinician, and then as I was a clinical instructor, and as I was a person who helped other people understand. That's always been my template, has been that book. And the best thing about developmental sentence analysis is that it's not a shortcut. There's no, so many people tell me in my school or in my school district, what we do is we sit kids down and we say, this is how your sentence will go. I want chips, please. Endpoint. And it seems like that's a logical idea if you were to look at it from an adult perspective. Like, oh, that sounds like grammar. Yeah, what's wrong with teaching it that way? Well, the problem is that it's not developmental. And kids don't do that. Kids don't do that as they develop the rudiments of grammar. What they do, and we'll go through this in detail in this section, is they go at it in this organic way, which is, I've got a single word. Finally, I've pared all my stuff down to a single word. But you know what? That single word has a history. It has a Gestalt history. and it's got a self-generated future. It's really the pivot point that Ann Peters and Barry Prezant said it was, because it's got all of the past and all of the future built into it. And so when a little one has gotten his gestalts down to a stage 3 word and he says, "Mama," is that a label? Like, "Oh, see that woman over there? She is my mama." No, of course not. It's like, "Mama, you're here." Or when a Gestalt processor has gotten down to, like in my example that I've used in the past about Dylan, and Dylan says, "I toy." He's got his whole history of all the toys that he loves and a sense of I when he gets down to that single word. And so he's learned that I is powerful. I is the subject of his sentences when he adds grammar to them. But the essence of it is at stage 3. That's the essence. And Laura Lee recognized that for analytic processors. She wasn't talking about Gestalt processors at all back at that time because they hadn't been really recognized by then. But what she was talking about is the essence of a full-blown sentence, like, "I love my mama, but you know what? I don't want her following me in every step of my life into the future." It's all embedded in that, what we would call single word, because it's got a future.